Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, Season 3, let's watch.
I think in the ideal world with a fiance that you just got engaged to, you know, you'd wake up, you'd have a really sweet morning, holding one another. Again, Cole just kind of rolled over and got right out of bed and then didn't really talk to me for a couple of hours.
We're learning that Zanab, I think is how you pronounce her name, and Cole, it's the next day. I think they might have had a physical interaction the night before, and she's saying she would have wanted some cuddling or some intimacy emotionally, and she's saying that for a couple hours. At first I'm like, well, you know, maybe he just wants to go to the bathroom and take a shower and stuff, but for a couple hours he didn't talk to her. Or is that just how she's narrativizing it? Was he just a little more standoffish in the morning or something?
As a woman, I think it's just very easy to get in your head about those things. Like, hey, what changed?
It's not a woman thing, it's a human thing. Men will mask it and will deny it, but everyone is prone to insecurity, and also everyone has a different style in the morning. Some people are in a terrible mood in the morning. Some people are in a terrible mood at night. It's just one of those things. Now, she's saying, I think, that she's reading into it like, well, does he really love me now? And that would be a thing that would, it's because a lot of things are in reverse, at least in terms of mainstream dating, right? That they fall in love over conversation without seeing each other and, of course, without being physical. And then after they're engaged, that's when they actually see each other and they start to engage in physical intimacy. So you could have kind of a reverse situation where you feel very secure emotionally, but physically you're like, I don't even know if he's attracted to me physically. I don't know if he's attracted to my face and my body and the way I am. Maybe he fell in love with my mind, but he's not in love with my body. Whereas usually there's an indication, at least in mainstream American dating, it's reversed, right? There's a lot of clear evidence that the person is attracted to you, right? And you'll have a number of interactions around that. And then the emotional love follows that usually. And so she's just wondering, she's like, wait, does he really love me or something? Now, is he being a jerk face? Is she being oversensitive? Is it just a product of the beginning of a relationship? Which I could totally see, by the way. I could totally imagine being in your head in a situation like this. It's just like, well, he said he loved me, but does he really love me? You know, particularly when you watch if they've seen other seasons. I think this was shot before season 2 aired, is my guess. Because while season 2 was airing, I heard about Love is Blind, the next season, being shot in Seattle, and this is not in Seattle. So I think they shoot these shows a long time ago, and that's why when they have the reunion episodes at the end of the season, a lot of time has passed. So this could have happened a year and a half ago, a year ago.
What did I do? Is it me? Was something about last night? Yeah, at this point, I don't even know if he's physically into me.
Okay, so we can learn from this ourselves, right? To be differentiated and to be careful about what we do here, right? If she starts to be convinced that his behavior is a clear indication that he's a jerk face or he's not attracted to her, then that could result in some behavior that could actually cause issues that will make him reject her, you know, like if she starts to attack him, for example. So this is why we want to be as differentiated as possible, not only from other people and from our family of origin, but also internally we want to be able to sift through our feelings and our thoughts. And so to be differentiated in a situation like this, you would want to have a question mark. And that's what I do with my clients. I don't tell them that they should think or feel a certain way, of course. But when you're in a high stress situation, which this is, you just want to have question marks like, well, I feel this and I'm having these thoughts like, oh, he's a jerk face, or I'm not good enough for him. But is that really what's happening? Am I just reacting to something? I don't know. Maybe it's accurate. Maybe it's not. Just having a question mark around that, right? Because if you have a question mark, then you won't act on assumptions, right? Or another thing that she could do is say, you know what? My needs are such that I am looking for confirmation that he still loves me and he's still attracted to me. And then she could just go to him and say, hey, sorry about this, but we were intimate last night. We met each other for the first time yesterday or however long it was. And I just would like some confirmation that you're still into me. I'm sorry to put that on you, but do you still love me? Are you still into all this? Could you convince me of that? Because I'm guessing that he would, because I think he really is into her. Or I don't know, maybe he's not.
Said Zay Hearts Cole.
Yeah, I got it.
So she's asking him about an iron or something, and he's drawing into the the fog on the window that he loves her or that she loves him. And then she's being a little like, yeah, I got it. So I don't know. Does this relationship not work out? I mean, it's funny because up until this second, I'm like, oh, it's all going to work out. These 5 couples, is it 5 couples? These 5 couples, they're going to get married and everything's going to be great and happily ever after. But of course, this is reality TV, so, and real life. So something bad's going to happen. Is it going to be this couple? And how do I feel about that? As a therapist, I don't really think either way, but as a citizen watching the show, I'm wondering who I'm pulling for. I think I'm pulling for this couple, yeah. I think I'm pulling for Alexa and Brennan. Colleen and Matt is complicated because I wonder if Colleen was settling for Matt or if Colleen was really into him. So I guess that's kind of a question mark as to whether or not Colleen's really in. Because if she really is, then yeah, I definitely am pulling for them. Because Matt seems like he's into Colleen. And Raven and SK, I don't know what to think about the two. Of course, I hope the best for them. But I will tell you that Raven has some signs of avoidant attachment style. Not severely, but she's said a number of things. For example, when she was talking to Bartise, and Bartise was opening up about his childhood. It was a pretty vulnerable thing, or his previous relationship or something. It was a pretty vulnerable moment, and she was doing jumping jacks. I didn't show that scene, but she seemed to be not really listening, and she wasn't really responding in an empathetic way. I don't think she lacks empathy, but so I don't know about her, but people who are raised in a way early in life where they're generally emotionally neglected, they might be abused, but often it's not over abuse. It's just a slight coldness to the relationship between parents and young child. The parent could have been raised in a way that was similar, meaning that the parent has avoidant attachment and thus they don't really notice other people's needs and they don't attune to the child enough, they don't react enough. Or the parent could be depressed or anxious or working too much, or there could be an illness in the family where one of the parents is preoccupied with their own health, maybe outside the home a lot and hospital, this kind of thing. So there's a lot of different paths that will lead to avoidant attachment. But what happens to the young child is they learn, oh, I can't signal my emotions because no one seems to care. And so I need to suppress my emotions. I need to control my emotions. I need to depend on myself. And also I kind of need to turn myself off from others because it's too painful. And so neurologically, by the time they're an adult, they don't actually pick up on other people's needs as readily. They have empathy, they have the capacity to attune and care, but they just don't notice it. And so when she was doing jumping jacks and not really responding to him verbally, because they're in the pods, that's how they're communicating, in a way that meets him where he is in terms of his vulnerability, it could be that, I don't know. Or she just doesn't like him, or I don't know. Because she did eventually say no to him. They both mutually said no to each other. But she said a number of other things that are in the direction of avoidant attachment style. For example, she said that before going on the show, she was mainly into looks. She was mainly into how someone looked. You know, she wanted muscles and a good-looking guy. And she regrets that. She wants to be more emotionally involved with someone. And so avoidant attached individuals will do that. In fact, I believe, don't quote me on this, but research shows that avoidant attached individuals will tend to have more sex with more people on average. Not that that's a bad thing, of course, but I think that's a product of the fact that they tend to have more surface level relationships, more short-term relationships, because they're avoiding vulnerability, they're avoiding going deeper because they're afraid if they do, they'll be rejected. Behind those walls that avoidant people will put up is a very needy person, a very needy inner child. So they're scared to let that out, so much so that they might not even notice it. But anyway, I don't know if she had a lot of sex in the past. That's not what she said, and it wouldn't matter either way. But she was saying that she was mainly into the surface elements of a relationship. She said that. And then she also said that She's standoffish in general. And she also said something, she said people usually love her more than she loves them. And if you watch it, you'd be like, oh, she's narcissistic or she's stuck up or something like that. But often that is what it's like to be avoidant attached, to have avoidant attachment style, especially if you have a lot of relationships. You start to learn, wow, people really fall in love with me and I'm not really into them. And what is going on there? Is it because I'm this wonderful human being and I'm beautiful and interesting? Well, could be a part of it, but often what it is that the avoidant person, part of them wants to join with someone, part of them wants to bond and wants to be vulnerable and to be in a long-term relationship, but another part of them is really standoffish, as the word that she uses, and put up walls. And so often what that will do is, one, avoidant people are often attracted to pursuers and to preoccupied people because those people will bridge the gap. If two avoidant people meet, they tend not to do very well because they both avoid so much, there's so much distance that there's no relationship there, there's no intensity. And so avoidant people are moving away, they're distancing often, and they need a pursuer, someone who's preoccupied, or just someone who generally pursues, to actually meet them. And they kind of need that. They might be subconsciously attracted to that because they know that for a relationship to work, one person has to express the needs of a relationship. But consciously, what will be happening for the avoidant person is like, well, I don't really want to be with this person, or I can kind of take it or leave it. And that might be true, but even when they genuinely want to be with a person, there's a very quick reaction of walls and avoidance and I don't need anybody, I'm independent, all this kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with being independent. There's nothing wrong with breaking up with someone, if you do it ethically. But there is something that denies the individual their own needs if they're not aware of their needs because they had to shut down their awareness of the needs because when they're children. So you will often hear from avoidant people that they are frequently being pursued and they will almost never pursue, because to pursue, to be vulnerable, is to put yourself out there and be hurt. And so avoidant people are avoidant of that, right? And so again, total speculation. I have no idea, but I just thought I would bring that up. And so with Raven and SK, I guess what I'm pulling for is that SK, and it is seemingly happening this way, that SK, he is able to help Raven open up and feel safe enough to be in connection with her vulnerability. And I don't know if it's down there. It just seems possible. But if I saw evidence of that, I would have more confidence in them working out and being happy together, because SK seems like a pretty sensitive person. And then with Nancy and Bartise, yeah, I'm absolutely pulling for them as well. So yeah, I'm pulling for all the couples. With Raven and SK and with Colleen and Matt, there's an asterisk there that I'm waiting to see play itself out. So yeah, so I'm pulling for Cole and for Zana, bring it all back around. I'm hoping that this works out. So I'm hoping that, I don't want to see this go badly.
We fell deeper in love last night. When we woke up, I thought everything was fine, but Zenab thought that I was disappointed or that I was in a mood or something. And then later she's like, what's wrong? She felt like I was giving her the silent treatment.
It sounds like a misunderstanding, and it sounds like he definitely is still into her. Now, maybe he's in denial of something, I don't know. But if she is distorting, then this starts to look more like preoccupied or disorganized attachment. If he's distorting, then I don't know what, but one of them is distorting, right?
Truth is, I was just really tired and trying to let her sleep, but she's not giving off this vibe of I love you so much. She seems a little standoffish still. And maybe she's over-analyzing everything and feels like we're kind of clashing a little bit.
Right, so this is the huge risk here, is that if things were kind of normal, or he was maybe a little, he said, I think he woke up before her and didn't want to bother her, so that's why he was giving her space. Meanwhile, she is interpreting that as he doesn't really love her. She starts to feel hurt, it sounds like, natural. She starts to build opinions about that and anger about that. She doesn't differentiate. And then she starts to have hostility towards him. She starts to exhibit that. He starts to try to react to that. He seems like he's trying to be pleasant, but there's also just whoa, what's going on? Which, if she's not aware of how she's causing it, she could say, oh, look, right, see, he's actually being distant. And then more hurt, more hostility, more distance. I don't know if that's what we're seeing, but it kind of sounds that way, right?
But then she literally told me that she loves me. So We're supposed to be getting married in like 4 weeks or something. So
now the antidote to this that I work with, this is a very common presentation in couple therapy. The antidote is vulnerability. It's always vulnerability. And non-hostile, non-accusatory, tentative expression of your pain, your hurt, or your fear, anxiety. So I'm just going to take a guess and say that if she were to be self-aware and to go to him, she would say, okay, so when you woke up this morning, you seemed standoffish. I don't know if you were. Okay, so that's that tentative part, right? You don't want to come at someone saying, I know what you did and you did this, because it's probably debatable. You're probably distorting. And even if you are right, it's usually just a good idea to be a little bit more tentative, because it engenders togetherness and openness and open conversation. You're flexible, right? So that's important. So you go to him, you say, so you're a little standoffish. I don't know if you were actually that way, but I thought you were, and I have a sensitivity to that. And, it's our first morning together, so I'm ultra paranoid, so I don't know. And I started to ruminate on it, and I started thinking, oh, does he not love me? Is he not attracted to me? Does he think I'm gross or something? Is he falling out of love? I mean, I don't know. We just met in person recently, so I'm not putting that on you, but that's what's going through. And so I started to get hurt, and then I started to get angry. I wasn't really noticing the hurt, and the cameras are around and all that stuff. And so I started to get a little short with you. I started to get a little hostile with you, and I'm fighting my way through it. But really, I should just tell you, this is deep down, I am desperate for you to love me. I want you to love me. I don't want you to not. I don't want you to not love me. I love you. That's why I've been standoffish. That's why I've been a little hostile today. It's because of how much I don't want to lose you. I'm terrified I'm going to lose you. So that's where I'm coming from. If you said that to someone, now the other person has to rise to the occasion, of course, but you make it very easy for the other person to rise to the occasion if you say that, because you're not accusing them. You're being flexible. You're being tentative. You're displaying your vulnerability. It will engage the other person's empathy. And I think he's capable of that. He'd be like, oh my God, no, I'm so sorry. I was giving you space because I didn't want to wake you up. Or I'm kind of, in the morning, I'm not really super affectionate, that I don't know. It's just, I'm sorry, but I'm totally sorry. No, I'm still totally attracted to you, even more so. And I'm still totally in love with you, that kind of thing. So, and I will say that there was something that happened the previous night. I don't think I showed the clip, where she was taking off her makeup, and he said something in passing. He's just like, oh my God, you look totally different. And she's like, well, hopefully not that different, right? And they had a few interactions around that, and he reassured her and said, no, you're beautiful. I can see your freckles. And it didn't seem out of the ordinary. It didn't seem strange. It just seemed like an interaction. But in light of this, I wonder if we're seeing something right now.
To believe what she's saying, I'm just maybe reading into it too much. So,
and him being vulnerable is the other antidote. He could go to her and say, okay, so I'm getting the impression like you might be upset at me. I don't know, but I just have to say, I love you so much, and I'm desperate to not lose you. And I'm just did I do something wrong? And if I did, I'm sorry. And, and the kind of the way you've been treating me, it kind of hurts my feelings, honestly. Like, I'm pretty sensitive that way. I don't want to accuse you of doing anything wrong, but I just feel like you're distant or something emotionally. I don't know. Is something going on here? If he did that, I'm guessing, again, she would be reassured. Like, oh, he's the one. He's the hurt one. Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm sorry. And then they can both, when you are talking, if you're in a relationship, the antidote to most of your conflicts, in all likelihood, if not all your conflicts, is what I'm talking about. Tentative, non-accusatory, non-hostile, speaking from the foundational feelings of hurt or anxiety. Almost always, the anxiety is about losing your partner. Ultimately, that might not be conscious as an anxiety, but that's usually the anxiety. For example, jealousy is anxiety about losing your partner, that sort of thing. When your partner seems distant, you're anxious about losing your partner. And then hurt is usually feelings being hurt. You feel rejected, usually is the core of the. So just think anxiety about losing your partner and fear of rejection, or fear of rejection and anxiety about losing your partner, and hurt about rejection, feeling rejected, right? So if you can get to those feelings, express those feelings, non-hostile, non-accusatory, tentatively, and you serve that up on a platter, if your partner has empathy and has any kind of feelings for you at all, they will step into that space and try to help you with it, which will reassure you. And they will say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, 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 no. And if they did that, that would help. I hope they do that.
I'm trying to look outdoorsy. Might end up looking a little Crocodile Dundee, though.
Crocodile Dundee?
Do you know who that is?
No, but it sounds incredible.
It was before your time.
Oh boy, here.
So there's this age difference. She called herself a cougar earlier, and she's 31 and he's 26. They were talking in a loving way earlier about how she's like, oh, he's going to take care of me when I'm older. And I'm like, you're 31 and he's 26. Like, it's not that big of a difference. So now she's saying that Crocodile Dundee is from her time. Crocodile Dundee was not from her time. She was born probably, yeah, she was definitely born after the Crocodile Dundee. Crocodile Dundee is from my time, and I'm 50, and I barely remember Crocodile. I bet you Crocodile Dundee is actually more like my older siblings' time.
What did you want to ask?
No, I'll just save it for later. I feel like we can talk about it later.
Okay, talk to me about it later then. Being very coy right now.
What's coy? Mischievous?
Like stepping around, whatever it is.
So it's just classic. Instead of being vulnerable, she is being accusatory. She is being, I don't know if I want to say hostile, but standoffish. He doesn't help this scenario by saying, I want to say something to you, but only if your mouth is full, like you don't want her to respond. And then he's like, well, I'll tell you later. Like, you don't want to do that to someone. You don't want to be like, oh my God, I have something to, no, I'll tell you later. You know, it's hard to deal with if you're like, well, wait, what is it? What is it? So I don't know what kind of thing he wants to say. Maybe he wants to say it away from the camera, but he was just going to say it in front of the cameras. Anyway, that was odd. I think he feels awkward. I think he feels like, what's happening right now? I feel like she's angry at me.
You know how I feel about the silent treatment. I would love to think that we are on the same page. I would really love to think that. But this morning was just kind of really different for me. I think it was just very unexpected. It was a side of Cole that I haven't seen.
Now, maybe she's right. They didn't show it, and it would be pretty boring to just watch him being standoffish, or maybe the cameras weren't there or something. I don't know. Maybe he was a complete jerk face in the morning. I don't know. But it would be a total shame if, because of the issues that I'm talking about, they have a pretty, because they were already in the midst of a pretty significant, awkward, hostile, angry, hurt moment between the two of them right now, that could completely negate any kind of love feelings you would have for someone, right? Because the love is so fragile. If you had something like this 7 years into the relationship, in all likelihood, it wouldn't completely negate 7 years of love, but their love is very new. It's very fragile. And if you have a moment like this, you could just, you might have a lot of lovey feelings, but it's not really completely integrated into the personality, if you know what I'm saying. And so it just seems like a shame that what I think to be a very common dynamic between insecurities, which is natural, to have it just completely snuff out the flame. It just seems, I hope that doesn't happen.
It does make you question where someone is. All those things that you're stripped of in the pods, body language, facial expressions. I know that the guy on the other side of the pod is the guy that I fell in love with.
Now, there's another possibility, which is that they're not actually compatible. They are compatible regarding conversation, but in terms of body language and communication and vibe and chemistry, they're actually not compatible. I don't know. That could be a factor here.
But I do think there's a disconnect there. Hopefully, we'll have better mornings than we had this morning.
You still actually care about me, right?
Right, so he's actually trying. He's doing it. He could do a better job with it, but he's whispering, I think, again, because of the cameras, but he's like, you still care about me, right? Like, you still love me. And that's in the direction of what I was talking about, the vulnerability. And so let's see how she responds.
There's a disconnect there. Hopefully, we'll have better mornings than we had this morning.
You still actually care about me, right?
They do.
It's so hard to watch. I mean, now if she doesn't love him and she's not into him, but I think her whole premise right now is that she feels rejected by him, but who's rejecting who?
We'll have better mornings than we had this morning.
You still actually care about me, right?
They do.
Yeah, it's so hard to watch. I mean, I see this in my office, but I don't often see it in the wild like this, right? Especially when so much is at stake. They fell in love. Again, if this was 7 years into the relationship, we'd be like, they just had a bad day. They'll recover. They have 7 years to bank on. But this morning could just completely destroy any good feelings that they have towards each other, which I think it would just be a huge tragedy, right? And you will hear me talk about this, that when you are terrified of rejection, and you have defenses like this to account for rejection, it's just like, well, I'm going to be hyper vigilant about making sure that I notice rejection signs, right? If you're really sensitive to rejection and you have been rejected a lot and abandoned and betrayed and rejected, and you're like, okay, rejection is around every corner. I have to be hyper vigilant. I have to look for every sign. And then you see something that might be rejection, and then you become sure, oh yeah, it's definitely rejection. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and I'm upset. And then I want to take it out on that person. Well, what happens is you end up getting rejected, which is just another trauma for you to now pile on the pile of traumas that justifies the defenses to be hypervigilant and hostile and push people away. I want to be clear, I don't know if that's happening. Sometimes the cast members will watch me talk about them. And so if she is watching, if you're watching out there, I'm not saying I know anything about you. I would have to assess you. I'm just basing my comments on what is presented here, which is all I can ever do. So I imagine there's a much more rich, complicated story in real life, but I'm just commenting on what I'm seeing here so that people in the audience can learn about psychology and attachment theory and be encouraged to go to therapy to work on things. All right, tune in next time when I continue watching, and everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.